Hello there, everyone. My name is Theresa Cuenca. I'm a career readiness coach at the University of Oregon. I'm very pleased to be with you today. I hopefully will be able to do this presentation with sharing my screen. I can't hear you, unfortunately, so I will rely on Bernard to let me know how the pacing is going. And if there's any questions or comments, Bernard, if you could put them in the chat. I am not sure if I'm already sharing my screen with the PowerPoint. Bernard, do you see my PowerPoint?
All right. Can you hear me, Teresa?
Yes, I can hear you.
Perfect. Can the audience hear? Can you write in the comments if you can hear me? All right. So, dear friends, we're sorry about all these technical hiccups. They do happen. This is technology. This is work of human hands. And with work of human hands, we always have this problem. So, thank you for staying in. Thank you for tuning in. And here we go. Today, we're talking about where and how to find jobs in the international development industry. And we have been pleased to receive other guests here who spoke to us about the development industry generally, about CVs, and about how they got into the industry. And today we have Theresa, who is a career readiness coach at the University of Oregon. So she does this for a living. She talks to students about this. When students are in their undergraduate studies or in their graduate studies, they talk to Theresa and ask Theresa the important questions. How can they be ready for the jobs? How can they be ready for the international development field? How can they be ready for the careers generally? And she is going to give that to us today for free. And students at the University of Oregon pay at least $30,000. That is about 15 million CFAs, for those who know, to get this knowledge. And Theresa is giving it to us today for free. That is something very generous. And we are so happy to have you today, Theresa. I would hand over the microphone to you and you'll do your thing.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. And I can hear you perfectly now, Bernard. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Okay, excellent. And
I hope the listeners and the viewers can also hear.
Yeah, I hope everyone can hear me. I will try to articulate and enunciate. Bernard, can you tell me if you already see my PowerPoint? Oh, now I can't hear you, Bernard.
Can you see the PowerPoint? Can you see it
Yes.
now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Can you control it from your end?
Let's see.
All right. Okay, I'll do it from here.
You'll do it from your end?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Bernard. Yeah, so I will be talking today about where and how to find international development jobs. This is a very, very big topic, and I don't claim to be an expert on international development work, but I did study international development work in my academic career, and I did spend almost 20 years working in international education, and I do have dear friends who work in international development work currently. So I'm combining resources and research and knowledge from friends and colleagues for this presentation today. So thank you very much for having me, and I would love to get started, and we can go to the next slide, Bernard. All right, so here is a description of what I will be talking about today. First, I would like to give some info on where to find international development jobs and how to be a career detective. I will be talking a little bit about what is the hidden job market and how could you benefit from the hidden job market. And then I'll be using an example for finding international development work using UNICEF as an example. And then I have some resources at the end, and we will then open it up for questions. We can go to the next slide, Bernard. So just to introduce myself very quickly again, thanks to Bernard for hosting me. I do work at the University of Oregon, which is located in Eugene, Oregon. And I used to work in international education, helping students who were coming to the US to study and helping students from the US go to other countries to study. And now my work is at the University Career Center, and I get to coach current students and graduate students on their career journey. And we can go to the next slide. So in the world of finding internships and finding jobs, there are a broad range of resources to tap into. I know you've already heard from one of the speakers before about their expertise in international development work. That is one of the best ways to find out about these types of opportunities and how you get involved in them is to pick people's brains. Talk to someone who has worked in that field or who is working in that field. There's also a style of networking called informational interviewing, which is a fancy term for asking people how they got their jobs and what type of career journey they've had. And do they know anyone who knows anyone who might be either offering an internship or offering a volunteer position to get that foot in the door with that employer? Or do they have an opportunity that you can actually apply for? So very many things make the international development work journey possible: networking, interviewing, meeting with prospective employers, and then of course the actual job search. And we can go to the next slide. All right. So in the previous speaker, they talked about acting locally in doing the type of work that you also may hope to do globally. And I think that's such a wise assessment. So if you're thinking about the world of international development work, how do you even get started? And we can think about, how do you get started locally in your community, maybe with using your current network and your current connections? How do you start where you are? So some of these questions that you can be thinking about are: what are the resources you already have in your own community? Are there government organizations? Are there nonprofit organizations? Are there international organizations that have a domestic branch in your community? Then you can think of the connections that you already have. So, is there a volunteer organization that you've been a part of since you were a child? Is there already a church or a volunteer mission that you or your family, or maybe your parents' friends, have been a part of, where you have some connections? Is there a study group or a student club or organization that you're a part of? When we think of these branches of a network, you can think of it as connections to people who might have connections. So friends of friends, or extended family, or colleagues, or coworkers, or your fellow classmates. That's really your network. And those people might be the people whose brains you can pick to find out about opportunities coming up. And we can go to the next slide. All right. So in the world of online networking, we reference some of the big networking platforms like LinkedIn, for example. So in the world of who do you know, who might know someone who might know someone who has a connection, LinkedIn can be used in that way as you're looking for maybe your fellow classmates who have gone into this line of work. Or are there professors or instructors or teachers that you've had that you can connect back with who are involved in this work? Are there alumni from your school or your college or university that have connections and maybe information that you can gather about this type of work? Another question as you're thinking about focusing on your professional interests, what is it that you really care about? What do you feel most passionate about? If there's a particular theme within the world of international development, is there something right here in your own community that you could get involved in now? Um, I'm based in the US, and so the US election is a very big thing right now. So, to use an example that's current in my world, for example, if you care about voting rights in your local community, is there something you can get involved in at the city level or maybe the county or local government level? Another thing to think about, and sometimes a way to get, again, your foot in the door, is if there is a community board that you could serve on. I was just talking with a colleague about this yesterday, about how do you get involved in that type of work you want to do before there's even a paid position that you can apply for. And he has had success with volunteering on a board. It's not a paid position, it's not a full-time role, but it's a way to get exposure to that community and to that organization and say, look, I'm here, I'm passionate, I'm ready to work, I have great ideas. Let me show you. Sometimes that first exposure could be a volunteer role or maybe serving on a board. We can go to the next slide. So this tip is much easier said than done. I absolutely know that in the world of work, you need a paid position in order to finance your life, of course. Is there any opportunity as you're looking for that paid position to do a volunteer role, even if it's something that's maybe 1 to 2 hours a week? Is there something that maybe a short-term project or a very specific, maybe a mailing campaign or a phone calling campaign that you could get involved in for maybe 1 to 2 hours a week? And yes, maybe you're still working in a full-time position in order to make rent and buy your groceries, but maybe there's something you could do for a very short window of time, again, to make those connections and to show your passion and to get yourself known, make your name for yourself. Um, Obviously, if there are other jobs that you're working on, are there things that you can still stay connected with while you're working in a field, maybe that's adjacent to what you're hoping for? So is there still like a study group that you could be involved in, or maybe a book club that meets once a month that's focused on the theme within international development that you're passionate about? Um, if there are any free trainings or free workshops where you can be growing and building in your skill set, some communities, some counties and cities and government organizations offer free trainings and free workshops if you're available. So those could be ways to still be growing your skill set, even if you're not yet employed in that full-time position. And then I know some other workshops will focus on crafting a CV in particular for international development work. Again, are there people maybe in the field who might share how they finished and crafted their CV with you to give you an idea of how did they use the language that is found in international development job postings when you are articulating your skill set and your background and your knowledge base, either from your academics or from your professional experiences or from your volunteer work. Are you using the terminology that is found in the international development job postings? I think when you're crafting a CV or anything, a resume or a cover letter, anything for a job application, the more specific you can be, the better. And it can be as simple as, let's say I was applying for a job at the library, and the library job posting says they're looking for someone who has experience working with the public. And on my CV, maybe I have customer service experience. Well, I could revise that to say experience working with the public. So I'm really using the terminology that makes sense for that library position. So that's the way to be more specific. We can go to the next slide. Okay, and then one of the themes that we talk about in the world of job searching and internship searching, almost in any field, is what's called the hidden job market. And what that refers to in terms of career coaching, the hidden job market refers to job opportunities that are not advertised publicly, or maybe they're not advertised publicly for very long. So I'll break down a little bit about different ways that positions may get filled through the hidden job market. And then I'll share how this could benefit you. So there are really 5 key ways that positions are filled through the hidden job market. So one way is what I've touched on a little bit. If a volunteer opportunity is something that you're able to get involved in, sometimes that volunteer opportunity is just what you need to get your foot in the door and to have someone see you and see your work ethic and see your passion for this field. And people want to work with people who want to work with them, who are passionate about the work that they're doing and excited to come to work, even if it's just a volunteer opportunity for 2 hours a week. It can be a way to make yourself seen and known. And sometimes a volunteer role could turn into a position that becomes a paid role. The second way is what's called temporary employment. I'll talk a little bit about this as it relates to, for example, working at a university. But temporary employment means a job that is initially for a short amount of time, a defined amount of time, maybe 1 to 3 months. And sometimes that temporary employment position could turn into a full-time or a more permanent position that you could apply to. And maybe your role as a temporary employee will help you as you're trying to apply for that full-time role. The other aspect of the hidden job market could be positions that you hear about through word of mouth and referral. So that means that you talk to someone who knows someone who knows someone who has heard about a job that may be opening in the future. We kind of think of it as the telephone game. Like, does someone know about a job that they could tell you about? That would be the word of mouth. The referral aspect is, do you know anyone in this line of work who could say, I know that person from school and they were an excellent student and they're really passionate about, for example, voting rights. maybe I could set you up via email to connect with this employer or this organization and sort of form that connection piece for you. That can be helpful as you're trying to apply for things if maybe you've already been connected to someone in that organization by someone that you know from school, let's say. Another aspect of the hidden job market is when an internal candidate is either promoted to a higher position or they're moved to another position laterally. That internal candidate is then freeing up their original position. So that is also part of the hidden job market. And then lastly, and this is something that happens in the world of work, is if you initially apply for a position and maybe you don't get that initial position that you applied for, but they remember your application. Maybe they even interviewed you and they remember you as being a solid candidate for this organization. And maybe 3 months, 2 months, a month from now, another role opens up and you might get an offer to interview for that role. That's another part of the hidden job market. And we can go to the next slide. All right, so what does this mean for you? How does this help you? So some ways that you can benefit from the hidden job market are with volunteering. So when you initially volunteer for a role, you might not know immediately if that is a position that might turn into a more permanent role in the future. But after you've been volunteering there for a while, if you've really shown your work ethic and you've shown your passion, maybe that's a conversation that you could have with the organization you're volunteering with. The next part, temporary employment. This is something that is quite common at the university systems in the US, for example. Temporary employment is when there's an immediate opening for a position for a defined period of time, let's say 3 months. And sometimes that temporary employment is just what you need to make yourself available and known to the organization so that then you're better positioned to apply for that full-time role. For example, in our University Career Center, we had a temporary employment role for our office manager. The person who was our temporary employee was a fabulous office manager for 3 months, and then they applied for the full-time position, and they were able to really shine in that interview process because we already knew their work ethic for the past 3 months. And then again, with the word of mouth and referral, it's also that telephone game. Do you know someone who might recommend you either to sit on a board for a project, to volunteer for a particular group, or maybe a community building activity? Would someone even recommend you to interview for a position? Also, things that you might be able to share could be an example of your work. Are you in a grad school program where you are working on a sample grant writing project? Is that grant writing project something you could share with prospective employers? Sometimes a sample of your work could be something that you upload to your LinkedIn profile if you have one. We can go to the next slide. All right. And then with internal candidates, again, this is a real world example from my line of work from the university. We've had 4 hires over the past year just in my team alone. And 2 of the hires were from other roles in the university. So in the hidden job market, their original roles in the university would be positions that you might hear about that are opening up soon. And again, a lot of that is you might hear about it through a position that you applied for, and maybe you didn't get that one, but maybe they still really valued you as an applicant and told you about another position that you might be well suited for. This actually leads into my next example. So what happens when you apply for a position and maybe you even interview for a position, but you don't get offered that initial position? This can feel very intimidating. I acknowledge it, but if you are open to it, you could ask for feedback. If, for example, they've interviewed with you and they've thanked you for your time, but they're going to go with another candidate, you could ask, is there any feedback you would offer on my interviewing skills or on my application as a whole? Or are there any other roles you feel like my skills would be better suited for? You could also ask if there is any training or skill building that they would recommend to you in the meantime. So if you are interviewing for a position and you don't get that initial position, you could ask them, is there some training you would recommend that I help build my skill set for the next position I apply to? Trying to keep in the loop with that original organization if you can. And I understand that that can be a nerve-wracking position to be in, but sometimes that first no might lead to a yes later on. And we can go to the next slide. All right. So some practical considerations if you're looking for work in a neighboring country, for example, just some things to keep in mind. Do research the employment laws for each country. Make sure that you meet the legal requirements for work. And if you do need particular documentation to show that you meet the legal requirements for work, is that something that you can acquire as you're applying or before you're applying? With different countries, their applications might look slightly different. So do some research if they're looking for a CV, which I know that there's another workshop that will be about crafting a CV for international development work. Or if they might be looking for a resume, a CV is much more standard in most countries across the globe, and also when you're applying for jobs in academia. A CV is a much more full and detailed document of your professional and academic experience. Do research the formatting that is expected for each country that you're applying to, and then pay attention to their terminology. Again, when you're looking at a job posting for an international development role, what is the terminology that they use? It could be slightly different from country to country. And we can go to the next slide. Okay, so how do you be a career detective? There are some technology things that you can use. So on different websites, there are some websites where you can sign up for an email notification. So on some of the international development work websites, you can create an account as you're applying for different roles. And some of them will say, do you want to be notified when a new position in this field is posted? And then you could get an email notification. Another way to be a career detective is to ask those connections you have or you already have in your community or in your network, maybe on LinkedIn, to keep you in the loop if they hear about openings in their organization, and if they hear about openings in maybe sister organizations that they could let you know about. If there are any government or county or city trainings or workshops, especially free trainings or workshops that you could get involved in, maybe try to bookmark local NGOs' events pages to see if there are free things you can become a part of. And then if you are studying in this field, or if you are hoping to study in this field, maybe there are professors or instructors or even your fellow classmates and alums that you can stay connected to. Sometimes seeing the work that they're doing can give you some good ideas for work that you might want to be doing as well. We can go to the next page. All right, so this one, I wanted to use one of the international development work sites, specifically through the UN. This one is through UNICEF, so the UN organization that is working with children in particular. And I just wanted to highlight some resource that you can find as a really good job search and application building tool when you're thinking about preparing to apply for a job. So, for example, the UNICEF website, before you even get to the page where you can apply for the jobs, they really do a good job of explaining how the job application and hiring process works. And part of that is giving you the resources and tools that you need to know if that role is right for you to be applying to. So on the UNICEF webpage, and I have some links towards the end, you can actually read all about their mission statement, why they hire, how they hire, who they hire, the types of projects that they get involved in their work, helping families and children, and what they're looking for in a prospective applicant and employee. So there's some really good detective work also on the job organizations' websites that you can do. So I won't read through everything here. We will share this PowerPoint afterwards, but in their process, before they even have you apply, they discuss the search. There's a self-assessment that you can take as a potential applicant to learn more about your potential as a UNICEF employee and how you align with their mission statement and their goals. And then they talk about applying. And we can go to the next slide. I just break it down a bit further for you. They talk about shortlisting, which is basically a process of narrowing down the candidates that they would likely interview for in the future or invite to interview for in the future. Then there's an assessment period, and you can actually learn more about their assessment process and what that looks like. And they might have some information on the timeline of when they usually would let candidates know after an interview process. And then they have the outcome notification. So I wanted to use this as an example to show that you do have a lot of detective resources at your fingertips, even as you're looking to apply for some of these positions in international development work. And then we can go to the next slide. And you don't have to write all of these down. We will share this PowerPoint with you so that you will have access to this after the presentation. But I wanted to break down some ideas of types of websites that will be helpful as you're looking for this type of work. And I started big with some of the really global organizations that I know you've heard about. So we have the UN on there with their main unjobs.org website. You can break that down further based on theme or type of organization that you're interested in working with within the UN. And then some of the other big ones that are also part of the UN, I've included UNICEF here, again, with the Save the Children organization, a couple of websites for them. There's the Global UN Environment Program, the Global UN Development Program, and then some larger charitable organizations that operate globally as well, such as Action Against Hunger, Oxfam, World Vision, and Save the Children. Some of these organizations you might already be very familiar with. I wanted to give more of an example of the really large global organizations and then also some of the charitable organizations as ideas for as you are job hunting. And then if we go to the next slide, I wanted to give a particular example for Core Africa. So, one of the organizations that I'm familiar with from the US side is the Peace Corps, and the Peace Corps operates in many different countries across the globe. And then there is a similar type of organization called Core Africa, which operates in several different countries within Africa. And I'll just read you some of their goals here. So their goal is to address two key challenges: creating opportunities for African youth and building community resilience. Core Africa places college-educated African youth in rural communities to help them identify and solve their most pressing local challenges. African staff manage Core Africa's offices in its countries of operation and are responsive to the specific needs and local context in each country's volunteers and communities. And in the Core Africa main website, the .org, you can see the different countries in Africa that they operate in and their different missions for non-government based action building and the different community organizations that they partner with. And again, in your own communities, in your own countries, you may have some other local focused organizations or NGOs that you could be a part of. I thought this was an interesting one with the Core Africa model. And then we can go to the next slide where I have a few more resources, again, as examples of websites you can use as you're looking for international development work. There's a global website called int.jobs. And so I've included the link there that is focused on development aid jobs in Africa. Another resource that I was thinking and brainstorming with some family, friends, and colleagues were the sister city organizations. There was actually recently in South Africa a world conference focused on sister cities and organizations that help promote the founding and partnership of sister cities with different countries in Africa and across the globe. And so that is a recent conference that they held in South Africa. And then just another job search website that is a national job search website called CareerJet. And when I was doing some research on that website, you could search by country. I think you can also narrow it down by professional focus. I just used an example there with a couple of jobs from Kenya as an example. So these are all just some resources that can be helpful as you're trying to look for this type of work. And I hope this gives at least a little bit of insight into kind of that job search process and maybe even that hidden job market. I think this was my last content slide, Bernard, and then I'd love to open it up for questions or comments as other people have great ideas in the chat, or if you want to open it up verbally, Bernard.
Thank you so much, Theresa.
Absolutely.
That's fascinating, and I think it's very useful to all of us who are watching and getting these resources in one place, and also learning how this system operates. Sometimes in certain contexts, people understand that when you talk to somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody, would immediately categorize that as corruption, and that it is not good for the job market. But my experience has been that when you talk to people who know people who believe in your capacities, they are going to share it, because nobody's going to recruit you out here if you are not competent. Yeah. So what is your take on that?
Yeah, I think in terms of trusting your gut instincts, I think that's a valuable part of the job search process and also the networking process. If I was thinking about it from a practical standpoint, if I was trying to find, again, I'll use an example of working at the library because I love the library. I would try to find someone who's already worked at the library, who has family who worked at the library, or maybe who has volunteered at the library for a significant amount of time. And I would try to connect with them first as sort of my insider person, someone who I could ask questions about. I could maybe be very transparent and try to share my CV with them and ask if they had some suggestions for how I could make myself more presentable to the library, for example. And I would also maybe try to find like-minded people. So, especially in the field of international development, if you are passionate about something, that really translates when you're connecting and networking with someone else. So if you can find someone else who's passionate about this thing, how did they get involved in that line of work, and what would they suggest as you're looking for this type of work?
Yeah, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining this conversation. This is Beyond Africa, and in collaboration with the Legal Gurus, we are organizing this webinar to empower us, to share skills with us so we can know where to find jobs and how to find them, especially for those who are interested in the international development industry. And not only them, but the skills we learn from these sessions are definitely going to help us everywhere, because sometimes when we talk about international development industry, many people tend to think about private sector and think, oh, that is only for human rights people, lawyers, or political scientists. No, everybody's involved in this field. You have people we need people in computer engineering, we need data scientists, we need cloud engineers, we need cybersecurity engineers, we need biologists, we need doctors, everybody is involved. So this is necessary for everybody to join and follow and learn how to get into this area that is very important and ready to transform Africa. There's a question on the screen for you, Theresa.
Yeah. That is such a great question. I'll read it out loud. My question is, how can we identify a scam job website from the original ones? Because there are a lot of them out there. That is a perfect question. My suggestion would be, if you see, for example, let's say a job posting, and you don't know if it's a real job posting for that organization, instead of clicking on any of the links in that website, go to the original website from your own Google search. So let's use UNICEF as the example. Go to the actual UNICEF website on your own Google search and do a search for that job posting. Try not to click on the links in this other website that you saw that maybe is not real.
Thank you so much. I know the gentleman who's asking that question, he's such a very critical and intelligent, insightful, and hardworking young man. So yeah,
Perfect question.
He would definitely ask such a question. Yeah, and talking about these scam websites, it's also good to know how to search, how to use the internet to go to the original site, just as Theresa is saying, we are going to share the resources with the links that Theresa has shared with us. But if you can bookmark this in your phone or on your computer, so that when you need a job, you go directly to those websites, it will be good. At the same time, if you receive an email or a link from somebody advertising a job from, say, UNICEF, and you look at that website and it doesn't say unicef.org, it says something else, that is definitely a phishing email and a scam email. And once you click on it, it's going to install viruses in your phone. So I know people circulate such things a lot, especially nowadays when it's difficult to get a job and many people are striving to find employment. So it's really difficult, and many people fall prey to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, take everything with a grain of salt. See if you can go to the original website on your own Google search first.
Yeah. Please keep your questions coming. Theresa is here for you, and she's willing to answer all those questions and give you the right responses from my experiences and what she has learned also from other people. Before the questions are coming, Theresa, I'm just a little bit curious about you. Could you tell us about your experience in France?
Yeah. So my international employment experience is in France. After I did my undergraduate degree, I did a 2-year teaching position in France, and I taught English in 2 different school districts in France. 2 different départements in France. And some words of advice I think I can use from that experience working professionally internationally. It was a government sponsored teaching program from the Ministry of Education in France. And that ended up being really important for me, because then I knew it was a legitimate, real teaching position that I was being offered. There was actually a Ministry of Education contact person from the 2 different school districts in France that had my application and had my file, and was able to reach out to me through a government application process. So, in terms of applying internationally, if you are looking for work in other countries than the one you're living in, if there is anything that you can find that is either affiliated with an organization that you already know and trust, or maybe you know someone who's working in that organization, there can be some really calming things about working for an organization that you already know that you can trust.
Thank you so much. There's another question coming from Babila Brian.
Let's see. Okay. Great question. So, is it advisable to go for a volunteer hiring position when you are financially down, especially as a young person in Africa? Perfect question. If you have the ability to do a very short-term volunteer position, I think it can still be valuable. So maybe something that is asking for 1 to 2 hours a week of your time, something that you could do while you're also maybe needing to do a job that would actually help you to pay rent and to buy your groceries. Volunteering, it can be the way to get your foot in the door. So if you can find something that's just asking for a small piece of your time each week, I do think that could still be valuable.
Yeah, thank you. Just to add to that, volunteering will not necessarily mean that you spend all your 40 work hours a week on that particular role. You could spend a few hours there, and it counts a lot. And with the modern world, you could also spend your time, volunteering from your phone or from your bedroom or from your kitchen, just writing maybe articles or your opinion pieces of things that your future self will not be angry with you about. things you'll be proud of in 10, 15 years. So yeah, you could write such things and put them out on websites, on blog posts, and even participate in conversations like this. If you see people put up like there is a podcast coming up or a webinar coming up and we're going to talk about this, you could just inquire, can I come in? Can I come in as a panelist? Can I come and talk about this? Or you just ask, next time, could you book me in? Or I know somebody who is a master in this topic and can contribute. That is how you build networks, and it starts from there. It starts from where you don't know it is starting from. You are doing something without even having an end goal in mind, but at the end of the day, you see that that proposal, that simple volunteer took you elsewhere, and landed you a very good job out here. Yeah.
Great advice.
Thank you. Another question.
Oh, this is such a great question. Is it recommended to request a feedback and some recommendations from the company, even when we don't reach the interview stage? Great question. It probably depends on how you feel. If you think they're a great company and you think that maybe you were very close to being a great applicant for an interview, I would suggest, if you can, try to be brave and ask them for some feedback on your application. You could still express your interest in their organization and in their work, and thank them for their time in reviewing your application, and ask if they have any suggestions for you as you apply for future things with their company. If you can do that, again, I know it's nerve-wracking, but it could be helpful if they come back with you with some helpful advice for your next application.
Fantastic. Just in connection with that, before I go to the next question, I developed a habit whenever I was interviewed for a position and I was told that a different person had been selected and hired. I would reply to the person, to the human resource or whosoever, and tell the person, thank you so much for letting me know. Thank you for spending your time talking to me and interviewing me. It means that you found something valuable in me. And if you have retained a different person, it means that that person has something I do not have. And please congratulate the person for me. And maybe we're going to meet sometime in the future. I think this kind of an email changes everything. And where I work now is what happened to me. And I was hired after some time. So it's necessary to create that good relationship. If you are rejected from a job, if not rejected, if you're not retained after you apply, it's not necessarily because you are not qualified or because you're a bad candidate. It could be because somebody has something that you don't have, or maybe they found somebody who is in-house who could do that job, or maybe there is somebody who knows somebody who asserts and certifies that this person is competent. So just keep on looking for the jobs, and at the same time building your skills and building your capacities and creating networks for yourself. I know this touches on this question from no, that is other question. Is this other question from Babila?
Well, that's a great question. I don't know that I'm the best expert to answer that question, Brian. Please, can you cite some necessary capacities to build when looking for international jobs? I'm definitely not the expert on international development work, if that's what you're looking for in particular. But again, just to reference the UNICEF example, I was really pleased to see from their job searching website that they had a self-assessment tool that they recommend you take before you even apply for their UNICEF jobs. And I think I didn't personally take the full self-assessment tool, but I think something like that is going to clearly articulate what they're looking for in terms of skill set and maybe professional and academic backgrounds, and maybe even personal skill sets. So if you can do some research on the job site before you're even applying, some simple things you can usually find for an organization. even if they don't have a self-assessment tool, they should have their mission statement and maybe even a value statement, and they might have the current projects that they're working on. So, for example, that coreafrica.org website, they do list I think they said they've had 800 development projects since 2013 for Core Africa. So you could look through the types of projects that they've done, the mission statement, for example, empowering youth in Africa, and then try to use that terminology if that resonates with what you have and what you value.
Fantastic, very good one there. We should be rounding up. It's already an hour. But before we do that, I just want to add something here. You know, in the international development industry, everybody is needed in the international development industry. So what matters is what skills do you have and how do you want to build them? Once you build your skills, they'll be ready for something in the international development industry. But how do you approach it? How do you get it? How do you get to show that these are your skills that you have? Let's take, for example, somebody who studied political science at the university. There are skills that you learned throughout. One of the skills is just mental ingestion of information and processing it. The other one is literal analysis, just writing. Writing is a very important skill in the international development industry for those who are in the arts. It's very important because most of the work you will do is policy driven, research and policy, research writing policy. So you're making recommendations to the organization or to the government or to international organizations to reshape policy to affect the development out there in the world. Now, when you already have these skills with these writing and reading skills from class, academic writing and reading skills, they are sometimes too academic and too literal for the professional world. So you need to step out a little bit of the academia and practice writing policy briefs or doing some kind of analysis, contemporary analysis of issues. You do comparative studies and just have them somewhere, maybe on your LinkedIn, on your X profile, on your Facebook profile, so that if somebody just Googles your name, that such an analysis can come out. But the most important thing is, the most important skill in my view here is reading and writing and analysis. And then if you have the opportunity, go implement projects in communities. You would do something in that community. Generally when we talk about project management in the international development field, it is true that it follows, on paper, it follows some well-established canons. But what you do, even by doing a small business around your neighborhood or leading your class group or your neighborhood group or your church group to execute a particular thing, is called a project. And if you can situate it in a way of situation, task, achievement, and results, I think that would be good. That would be good for you to go. Those are skills that you're already building. Yep. There is the next question here.
It's a great question. I don't think I'm the greatest person to answer this one, but I'm assuming Bernard has some thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think I have some thoughts on this, and that is why I said from the very beginning of this session that we are lucky to have Theresa here, because students who listen to Theresa, or people that Theresa serves, pay tens of thousands of US dollars to listen to Theresa, and she's giving to us for free. That said, we are doing this series of webinars were designed to help us build our capacities to start looking for jobs in the international development industry, because we took cognizance of the fact that most African universities do not have career readiness centers where they help students prepare. And most often, internships and co-ops and practicals and labs are not our thing, especially those of us who studied liberal arts. So it is through sessions like this that we share experiences and tell people how we got about it. And At some point, we're definitely going to be doing some one-on-one coaching so that those who are interested could build their skills also bit by bit. So at this level, we are still just exposing the field, making people know what it takes to be in the field and how to get into the field. But then at the end of this series, we'll work with people who are dedicated, who found reason or found a passion or found the desire to get into the industry. So we'll work with you one-on-one and we'll build those skills. And it will be fantastic working with you, my dear brother. That's my brother talking. I know him.
Great question.
Yeah, thank you so much, brother Stan. Yeah. So here we have, okay, that's a comment. That is it. That is
great.
Nunana. Congratulations, Nunana. That is the right way to go. Yeah. Yeah. You appreciate and make sure that they value your skills. They invited you for the interview because they knew your skills. And that is why you should just remain calm, appreciate them. They could even recommend you to another company. So taking a different person does not necessarily mean that you're a bad person or that you are not qualified. It's just that at times only one person must be taken. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Next question.
Oh, this is a great question. How can you fulfill your dream of working for an international development organization when you feel you've passed the appropriate age range without necessarily building the required experience to realize that ambition? This is a wonderful question. Just speaking again from something that I know a little bit about with friends and colleagues and family. So the Peace Corps, speaking again, it's a U.S. government-based organization, but the Peace Corps is all across the globe. Those types of jobs have recently, or fairly recently, made it so that there's no age limit. They have the ability to work with applicants all along the professional age range. And sometimes the professional age range might be working with retired volunteers that have an opportunity to volunteer for 2 years and 3 months internationally. So in thinking about that, it makes it seem like this type of work doesn't have an age limit on it. Again, especially if you have even an hour or two a week that you could get involved in a book group that is maybe focused on what are the most important things in the world of voting civically at this moment. How do you stay in this field and learning about this field, even if you're not necessarily in school anymore or a student anymore? There still could be ways through a book group or through the library or through a community resource, even auditing classes. If there is a university class that maybe they would just let you sit in on that is all about learning how to write policy for international development work. Maybe you could, introduce yourself to the professor and ask if you could sit in on the class 1 to 2 hours a week. So I think there's still ways to be building that skill set, even if you've professionally been devoted to other work in your career.
Yeah, thank you so much, Theresa, for that. Before I say what I want to say in contribution to this topic, I have shared a link in the chat section for a survey. You could fill it out and we see how we are doing. And that is going to tell us the next directions we would take and also seek to know if this is relevant or not. We shouldn't be wasting your time because your time is your money and your internet connection is your money also, and we shouldn't be doing that. Okay, talking about skills and age, I think the advantage of the international development industry is that there is no retirement age. With the international organizations like the World Bank and the rest, there could be a retirement age. But with the rest of the industry, there is no retirement age. And the most important thing here is The skills you use in another sector are relevant in the international development sector. So recruiters are looking for skills and not for the name of the organization where you worked. A recruiter wants to see if you can get out into the field and bring in information from 50 people per day. Okay, you were doing sales and moving from door to door. Let's take that as an example. But then the recruiter wants to have information about children who are malnourished in a particular locality. You need to go from door to door. The skill you use in sales is the same skill you are going to use in moving around. Or they want people who will sit and analyze data that comes in. You have analyzed data maybe as a cashier or as a salesperson. That is a skill they need. You don't need to go to a different school or to another school to learn how to become active in the international development field. Again, we are going to work on this in the future, and we'll do one-on-one sessions and help those who need to transition. And we'll definitely be inviting other experts like Theresa to also work with people one-on-one. And that is the beauty of the international development field, because most people who go to the international development field, they go there to serve. And once they get an opportunity to serve and build, they do it even without pay. They do it because that is what makes them happy. So this podcast is working towards that, and we are going to have that coming up in the next few months, but not immediately until we're done with this session of introductions. Then there is no more question coming. There is no more question coming in. Okay. If there is no more question, let me just make one announcement. We are going to receive someone who is, how will I put this? Okay, the next speakers are going to be members of an international recruitment firm. So these are people who recruit and place in different development organizations. So they know the questions that they ask at interviews. They know what they want to see in your resume. They know the companies or the organizations themselves, and so they can prepare you effectively for that interview that you're going to have. And so the next two sessions would come back to look at CVs and cover letters, and also how to interview for international development jobs. So I think those are two critical sessions that no one should miss, and send out the word so that people learn and know that that is what is up there and coming up for them. Thank you again. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us. And Theresa, thank you so much for doing this. We plan to do this, and for the change of season had its bite on us. But that's okay. You are here, you are strong, and you're active, and you've really done a fantastic job for the viewers. And I think they're happy from the comments and from the questions we're seeing. I think people are really happy, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the invite.
Thank you so much again. And we are going to send out, I've already shared the link for the, survey. Once we receive the answers, we are going to share them with you, so you see how beautifully you did.
Great.
Yeah. To Nunana and Frank Kwasi. So generally we planned to have this on the last Friday of every month, but it seems it's too broad. And we shall be making an announcement about the next sessions once we conclude on the date with the next speakers. And you would receive that in your email. I hope you've registered. If you registered, then we have your email on file, and we are going to send out an email with the recording of this session and the resources that Theresa has shared with us, and also the outcome of the survey. And we also run a podcast. We are going to be interviewing somebody who, the author of this book, Africa Open for Business. She lived in Africa for 30 years and wrote this book because she believes that people can survive and do business in Africa. So you are also welcome to watch the sessions. We announce them every time. And if you want to know what is on our sites, on our platforms, subscribe to our YouTube page and receive a notification as soon as everything is up. Thank you very much, and have a great day, Theresa. Have a great day.
Thank
Have
you
a
so much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night in Africa.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.